I'm Matt Fox of Sweat Elite. I recently co-authored a book called Eliud Kipchoge, History's Fastest Marathoner. We spent a month training with Eliud last year, and this is the Physical Performance Show.
And the winner is...
Failure is not an option.
I've had my ups and my downs.
Phelps with 10 meters left. 3 minutes too good. The crowd roaring. Freeman wins gold.
I think it's an absolutely breakthrough experience.
Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, the show designed to inspire the pursuit of your physical best performance. I'm your host, Brad Beer. Listen in as we delve into how the world's top physical performers achieve their success, as well as the highs, the lows, and the journey of getting there. Let's get ready, set, let's go. Welcome back, or welcome to the Physical Performance Show, brought to you by Sanitarium PB and Pogo Physio. I'm Brad Beer, physiotherapist by trade and training and founder of Pogo Physio. As per the intro, the aim of this show is to educate and inspire you towards the pursuit of your own physical best performance. We do this through interviews featuring some of the world's top physical performers and also some of the world's preeminent experts in their chosen fields. Each week, we'll aim to bring you the highs, the lows, and the learnings of the featured guests. And for today's episode 136, we feature an interest edition with Matt Fox of Sweat Elite. Matt and his co-author Tait Hearps have just released an online book titled Eliud Kipchoge, History's Fastest Marathoner, an insight into the Kenyan life that shapes legends. And if you're like me, like anyone that appreciates physical performance at its best, then you saw Eliud Kipchoge's 2:01:39 new marathon world record set in Berlin, which lit the world of sport alight. And I'm sure, like most people, you've wondered, how on earth is a 2:01:39 possible from Eliud Kipchoge, from any human being in the marathon? That's an average of 2 minutes, 53 seconds per kilometre. Well, Matt Fox and his co-author Tait Hearps travelled to Kenya in 2017 in the lead up to Eliud Kipchoge attempting to break the world record in the 2017 edition of the Berlin Marathon. It didn't happen due to bad weather in that particular race. That fast forward 1 year later and the world record was obliterated. And on today's episode, Matt Fox of Sweat Elite takes us behind the scenes of what it was like to train in Eliud Kipchoge's squad. He also spent time training with 800-metre world record holder and dual Olympic Games champion David Rudisha. But it's the experiences with Eliud Kipchoge's group that I think you're going to really enjoy. So let's jump in with Matt Fox of Sweat Elite, co-author of Eliud Kipchoge, History's Fastest Marathoner, and insight into the Kenyan life that shapes legends. Matt, previous guest Alex Hutchinson in his book Endure had stated there when he'd spent time around Kipchoge and around the Breaking 2 project covering that he predicted it might happen by 2000 within 75 years, and he was forced to swallow a bit of humble pie after that. And he surmised that science cannot teach Eliud Kipchoge anything. Would you agree with that?
I would. I mean, I've read what Alex wrote in his studies and his articles after that, and I think that his point was that Kipchoge did a few tests in the lead up to that Breaking 2 project, and they were all treadmill based, and Kipchoge hadn't run on a treadmill before. I think maybe he'd run once or twice. And Eliud's running style doesn't really suit running on a treadmill. I can't tell you the specifics as to why. I'm not that technical in that space. But his results didn't really show he was in this form he was really in, I think was the conclusion there. So I think what Alex was getting at was that these tests, although they can be beneficial in certain ways, absolutely, you can't really look at what Kipchoge is doing and think and predict an exact time. Because I think Tedeschi, who was also one of the runners in that Breaking 2 project, who did have the half marathon world record until just the other day, and it was broken. His test results were showing. I think that his test results were showing that he was potentially going to run just as fast as Kipchoge or faster, and of course that didn't happen. So I think that what he was getting at there was that these tests, they can be beneficial, but in this sense, when you're looking at the absolute top end, sometimes they don't predict overly well.
And taking your Western, and we'll get to your history here in a moment, your personal running background to give context to your experiences, but when you were there training with Kipchoge or observing the training and as part of the squad, you must see Western practices that could be implemented that you would perceive would make a difference.
For sure.
Correct?
Yeah, I mean, there were some pretty big differences that I saw over there to what I've experienced here. I mean, I've trained... I've been very fortunate to have trained alongside some very good runners in the Western world as well. And it'd be really good to talk a little bit about, I guess this is what we're leading to, talk about some of the differences that we observed over there. And I think the biggest one was how loosely structured their training program was, which would surprise a lot of people. I mean, of course, they have a weekly program that they try and follow, that they do follow, but they're very willing to adjust it based on how they feel and what the weather conditions are like. So if they feel tired, they do rest. If the weather's really bad, they do change plans. And I think that was something that surprised Tait and myself quite a lot, because you would think that someone that's the best in the world would be very... I don't know, we just thought that he would be very structured and strict on what they're doing. It's sort of like, no, it doesn't matter what's going on, we're going to do what's planned. And it was actually almost the opposite of that. Whereas I think I see a lot of people, especially in the US, they're very much, okay, we've got a program, we've got a plan, and we're not changing this plan because that's what's on paper. And that was very different over there. Of course, I could talk about a lot of other different things in terms of differences, but that was the main one. And that's what a lot of people, when people ask me for a quick summary as to what that trip was like and what did you learn, that's the number one thing.
So they were willing to adapt and change,
Yes.
and as you said, based on two things, how they felt but also the weather.
Yeah.
Can we park that to come back to specific examples there, Matt, and just go give us a little bit of your genesis story, Matt. How did you even end up with an interest in running yourself?
Sure.
And the Sweat Elite, the origin of Sweat Elite?
Yeah, sure. I'll fast track about 15 years here, but coming out of high school, I was an AFL player. I had a very bad injury in the year of the draft. I probably wouldn't have been drafted anyway, but I guess I was sort of Queensland under 16 team. But I was that was the goal. Had a terrible injury in the year of the draft, and I started running essentially that year because I didn't really know what else to do, and I was a pretty strong runner as an AFL player anyway. That year I ended up being at national championships for the 800 metres. That led me to try it for World Juniors a few years later, which led me to sort of try and qualify for things like the Olympics. I fell short a couple of times. I was 5th in Australia on 2 occasions at the national championships. And then after I sort of stopped running competitively in 2013, 2014, how it came about I don't specifically remember, but I started a mobile application with a group of friends in 2014 that was essentially what Strava is now. Now, at the time, Strava wasn't huge in running. It was only really big in cycling. So we were sort of trying to create a Strava for running, which is almost laughable now considering how big Strava is. But at the time, it wasn't really very big in running. That application over a 2.5 sort of year period failed due to a few poor business decisions, I guess. And I took the lessons from that project to start Sweat Elite. I think I looked at a lot of the data in that mobile application, which again was just like Strava is now. It's sort of like a social media for running. And I noticed how many people were interested in what the elite athletes were doing. So I tried to create something that was less expensive to run. Mobile apps are very expensive to run, especially considering you need sort of like a critical mass of people to make it work. Otherwise, it just doesn't work as a social media app. A lot of people were looking at the elite athletes that were on there. So Jake and Zane Robinson got on there pretty early from New Zealand, the guys that train in Kenya now. There was a few other Nick Simmons was on there, the 800 meter American champion. I think he won 8 national championships. There's a few other guys around that level. And I took sort of what I learned there to turn it into a sort of like a small media business. I thought, how can I make this a cheaper business to run and that people can still learn about the elite athlete stuff? So that's where it started. And 2.5 years on, or 2 years on now, it's grown to be, I guess like a bit of a name in the running world, which I'm really stoked about and really fortunate to have happened. And I think it sort of came as a result of a failure in the first place in that mobile app. So So yeah, hopefully we can keep going.
Well, what you guys are outputting at the moment is terrific, and anyone listening, I'd encourage you to jump over and follow along with the Sweat Elite, particularly on
Thank you.
on Instagram and then also on the website. But your own background there, I mean, you've mentioned to me that you were training with Ryan Gregson in the past here in Australia, who's one of our previous featured guests.
Yep.
So would you, with the lessons you've now learnt, which we're about to cover, would you do anything differently with your own running career if you were to go back, and what would that be?
Yeah, I probably would. As an 800 meter runner, so I was focused on the 800 meters. I ran 148 about 50 times, which is annoying. I never quite broke through. To put it into some sort of perspective, to qualify for the Olympics, it's 146. So I was never fast enough to run a good 800. So I think I really needed to do a lot more endurance work. I didn't really ever do that. I think I just tried to keep hounding the speed too much. So I'm really talking 800 specific here. If I could go back and do it again, I would do a lot more 1500 meter 5K work and just get a lot fitter. I didn't really do that. But as you mentioned, I was very fortunate to have trained alongside Ryan Gregson for quite a while. We were very good friends. We're still friends, but back between sort of 2007, 2010, we were very close before he sort of started to head overseas and race a lot. And I was, I guess, really fortunate to have trained with him a lot just before he broke the national record, the 1500 meter national record, that is, of 3:31:06, I think, or 09. I saw a lot of his training in person in the lead up to that, so that was really interesting. And he did that as a 21-year-old, so that was very fascinating. And I think kudos to him to have been able to keep at such a high level between then and now. I mean, he hasn't been able to come back to that time, but he's obviously been at every major championship since, and yeah, good on him.
Yeah, absolutely. And Matt, let's so thanks for that bit of background information into your journey, brief. If we now jump back over to some of these observations of training in Kenya with Rudisha's camp and also Kipchoge's camp, Eliud's. I mean, how did you even end up there in the first place? Like, what's a non-African runner, a white boy from Australia, doing over there? Yeah,
sure. So I started the business just by doing a whole lot of interviews with people that knew the training of Mo Farah, Craig Mottram, and Wilson Kipsang. So we started to, I sort of did a lot of research on those three to begin with, interviewed a ton of people, put together a few ebooks and started selling them. Very quickly they started to sell pretty well. So I sort of used that initial fund. I started the business on essentially less than $1,000. It was about $500, I think. And I've sort of used that initial income. Obviously, I was thinking after sort of 6 months, okay, what next? Like, what are other athletes that we can cover? And Rudisha was one that... Rudisha had come to race in Australia in the past, and I'd raced against him. He obviously demolished me, but he demolished everyone in the field. But I happened to meet his coach, Brother Coleman, at the time, and I didn't expect him to remember me, but I sent Brother Coleman an email saying, I've just started this media business. I did race Rudisha. I did meet you briefly. Would you mind if I came to train with you in Kenya? And his response was literally something on the lines of, if you dare. Like, it wasn't that short, but it was sort of like, hey, Matt, thanks for contacting us. Yeah, if you dare to come out here and train, come, go for it. And I booked a ticket like the next day. I was living in Europe at the time, so it wasn't so far, but I just jumped on the opportunity. And both trips, the Rudisha trip and the Kipchoge trip, were pretty risky, to be honest. Like, with Kipchoge, so I know I'm going to rush forward and talk about Kipchoge. With Kipchoge, we didn't even ask him really. Like, I asked a friend of a friend, Renato Canova's friend over there. So some of people listening to this might know who Renato Canova is. He's a very famous coach. I knew his friend, and his friend basically said, anyone can go there and jump in with sessions if they want to, but just be warned, it's in the middle of nowhere. And it's difficult to find a place to stay, and you're gonna need a motorbike. Like, you're not gonna be able to just turn up. Like, it's very difficult. They don't really run the track much. They just like pound through the trails, and it's more difficult than it seems because you're not in a city. You're in the middle of nowhere. So we sort of just turned up and asked him, "Can we just cover some of your training?" It was a risky move, but in the end it paid off.
Kipchoge.
This is Kipchoge now. Yeah.
And you turned up with Tait.
Yeah.
Couple of boys from the UK at that stage, or Tait flew out from Australia.
Tait flew out from Australia. I offered for Tait to come out. He's probably our number one. He is our number one rider. And yeah, I paid for him to come out. I came from Europe and met him there, and the rest is history, really. And now we have a book and a ton of articles that have had some big reads, and yeah, it's great.
And so you're in Kenya.
Yeah.
And at what point of Kipchoge's, I mean, I'm butchering his name because you've been there and you know how it's pronounced. So Kipchoge's preparations for like breaking 2 and more recently Berlin. How many years ago? When was this?
Yeah. So in May 2017, Kipchoge... Actually, I'll go back one more. In August 2016, he won the Rio Olympics. In May 2017, he ran the Breaking 2 project and ran 2 hours and 25 seconds. He announced shortly after that he would race the Berlin Marathon in September of that year and try and officially break the world record. When he announced that, I jumped on the opportunity and said I tried to sort out a way for us to get there. That's when I got the all clear that pretty much anyone can turn up and run with him, but it's very difficult to do. And then we went in August, so the month before he was doing Berlin. So we essentially covered the 4 to 8 week period, which I knew, being a runner, was the sort of the period where you train them, the highest volume. I thought that would be the most interesting. 4 weeks out to 8 weeks out before he had a crack at that world record. And it's a bit of a shame he didn't break it at Berlin, because he was probably in the shape to do so. The weather just wasn't ideal, as I said earlier. But at the same time, we did learn, one of the many things we learned over there was that he does the same preparation for every major marathon. So what we saw was essentially what he did leading up to his marathon. His times might have been slightly different, and maybe he might have changed a few little things here and there. But for the most part, what we saw was the same as what he did leading up to the world record.
And Matt, in the ebook there with yourself and Tait, you have in the appendix outlined an exact sort of training week, which was a snippet of what you just shared, was in the lead up for the world record attempt in Berlin in 2017. So can you paint that in words? What does that look like? Okay, so I probably need to reread it to remember absolutely everything, but I mean the key sessions I remember very clearly. So right now we're just going to talk about Kipchoge's week and sort of what it looks like. But his main sessions are on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. I think the first one that I want to mention is Tuesdays. They normally do, or they always do, track down at Eldoret. So where they live in Kaptagat is 2,500 meters above sea level. They have to travel about 45 minutes down the mountain to Eldoret, which is where the main sort of city is. I wouldn't really call it a city. It's sort of like a big town, about 300,000 people. That's at 2,100 meters altitude. And they do track there on every Tuesday morning. It tends to be at marathon pace or slightly quicker. And they tend to do between 12 and 15 kilometers worth of intervals with between 1 and 2 minutes rest. Very stock standard training sessions, stuff like 15 by 1K. Sometimes they did 15 times 1,200. A very common session they do is 5 sets of 2K, 1K, with the 2K at marathon pace and the 1K at half marathon pace. And the recovery between them is pretty much always the same. It's always between sort of 1 and 2 minutes. So that's Tuesday. On Thursday, they always do a long tempo run. And that was probably the most fascinating thing to us, because that was the first session we joined them on. They start at 6:10 in the morning outside of their compound in Kaptagat. They do the first 1 to 2K very slow to warm up. So I'm talking like 5.5 minutes per kilometre. So very, very easy. And then they just, probably at about the 1.5 to 2K mark, they just move the pace from 5.5 minute kilometres down to 3 minute Ks almost immediately. So, and then they run the rest. When I say 3 minute Ks, it's probably closer to 3:10, 3:15. But keep in mind, this is at 2,500 metres altitude on muddy trails. And we joined them on a motorbike the first time, because we knew that we weren't going to be able to keep up. And so we just sort of sat behind them for 40K of this tempo run, which they did in, from memory, it was 2:15 or 2:16. So yeah, again, I'm repeating myself. This is at 2,500 meters altitude. Okay, they're sort of used to that, the altitude, but this is a hilly trail, and they're just hammering around at 3:10, 3:15 per kilometer, and it's obscene. So this is their Thursday morning, and I know we're still Thursday, and we're just talking about a whole week here, but it's a 30 to 40K tempo run.
It's 30K one week, 40K the next week, 30K, 40K. So they change it up. I didn't get a clear answer as to why they do that. I guess one week's slightly easier than the other. Yeah. That's the only reason, but yeah.
And how many people are doing the run? You guys are on the back on a motorbike, because I wondered how you kept up. No disrespect to your running abilities.
There's no way I would have kept up.
How many people are in the group?
There was about 40 to 50 every time we went. So we went to 3 of them. There's a core group of about 15 to 20 of them that stay inside the compound there. So they've got a global, their management team is called Global, I think, NN running team. 15 to 20 of them that live in there. So they come outside, and there's a whole lot of sort of randoms that come on and just jump on the back and hope for the best and run as far as they can.
Randoms as in local randoms?
Yeah. And some of them sort of end up finishing 10 to 15 minutes behind him, and some don't finish at all. Some finish in 2 hours 50. Some of them completely blow up at 30k and jog in. It's very funny. It's very interesting.
And so by the end of that, what's the attrition look like? How many people might finish?
I don't remember, mate. Probably 3/4 of them
Would finish.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we didn't hang around for ages after, because Kipchoge starts and finishes those runs right outside his house. And when he finished his run, this is actually also quite funny. He just walked straight inside and like sat down and had a tea. Like, he didn't do any cool down or anything. He just did the last kilometre in 3:10, I think, or 3:08 or something, whatever it was. And he just literally walked 200 metres into his house and sat down and just drank tea for the next hour. So we followed him inside. So we didn't really wait to see the rest of the people come in. But from memory, one of the ones we did hang outside for a while, it's probably about 3/4 of them. Yeah, so it was about 40 to 50 of them.
Wow. And so what sort of tea was you drinking, Matt?
I don't remember. Tait probably would remember. It was just a basic Kenyan tea. But I think one point that was definitely going to come up here is that they are not fancy at all about what they eat and drink. So it would not have been anything special. It would have been some basic tea they probably got from the supermarket. I mean, these guys have no real sports supplements. They have sports drink. They have the, I don't know how to pronounce it very well, Marathon, that brand. It's very common in the running world now. They have that at the end of the run, but they don't have any protein powder. They don't have any other supplements. It's very basic there. So I think that tea, although I could probably find out if I asked some questions, it was probably just a supermarket tea. It wouldn't surprise me. That's what they're like.
And so you're in Kipchoge's home.
Yeah.
And
not his home. He actually lives in Eldoret, but that's his training sort of centre.
Training centre.
Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of people that have followed Eliud would know or appreciate that they live very humbly.
Very. Yeah.
How humble?
I mean, he does the dishes. He cleans the bathrooms. And there's articles about this written online, and it's not a joke. Like I really saw that firsthand. He does washing. He doesn't treat himself any differently to the young kids that have come in. Like there was one, I can't remember his name now, but he was an 18-year-old guy that I think ran 2:09, and he was a very promising young guy. I wish I remembered his name, but I don't at the moment. And Kipchoge, I just remembered him sort of mentioning something like, "Oh, it doesn't matter like who this is. Like we're all doing these jobs." So he does, cleans the house, does the dishes. It's a very humbling life. It's very, very basic life. So again, like you read about this stuff online, Runners World publish this sort of stuff, but I saw it firsthand. It's the truth. It's really, really basic there.
Yeah, amazing, isn't it? And let's go, Matt. I mean, we're discussing some of the surprising elements. We were discussing this earlier that you observed coming from your Western training methods to training with the Kenyans there in the Rift Valley. You said that they were fairly loosely structured, which surprised you, and you gave the specifics. They would change training on how they felt and also on the weather. Can you give any specific examples?
Yeah, sure. One night, very early on in our month, it rained very heavily overnight, and there was a trail that they normally do their fartlek on, which was a little bit muddy. So the last minute they decided that the course was too muddy, and they decided to do the fartlek just down the main highway. So they were running down the highway with trucks horning, motorbikes horning, because everyone knew, most people know who he is there. So, 1 minute we're out the front of global headquarters at 6:10 in the morning in the dark, waiting to run down these trails, and then sort of Kipchoge or someone else agreed that no, we're not doing it there. It's too muddy. We're doing it down here, which is just like it's not like a highway here in Australia where there's tons of cars, but at the same time it's a main road and there are major trucks driving by. So he's just hammering down the highway at 245 per kilometre with massive trucks driving within metres of him. So that's a good example, I guess, of how how willing they are to change their plans so last minute. He just doesn't faze him. Like I was thinking to myself, what if this guy he could easily hit him? If he was.
And this is in the dark.
By this time it probably was it was light, but
Are they horning out of respect? There's Kipchoge.
Yeah.
Or horning get off the road.
No, probably more so out of respect.
Yeah.
There's probably a little bit of both, but for the most part, we saw people waving and yelling out the window and cheering him on. So.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
Okay. And then what about an example of? I think this really lands home for so many people listening about changing training based on how they felt.
Yeah, he mentioned to us after one of the long runs that when he feels really tired, he has a day off. It's really that simple. So he doesn't have a structured day off every week. I guess I'll get back into the conversation shortly about his weekly program because we were almost there. But he does run every day, but probably about once every... I don't remember if he said the specifics, but someone did say to us that he has a day off about once every 3 to 4 weeks, just when he feels tired. And sometimes if he feels tired on a day that's supposed to have a morning run and an evening run, he just won't do the evening run. And it doesn't faze him in the slightest. And I think that's a massive difference to a lot of attitudes in the West, where people sort of go, I've got to do 160 kilometers in the week and I can't miss it regardless of how I feel. And that's, in my opinion, looking at not only Kipchoge but also Rudisha and studying all of these top athletes, that's a really poor attitude in my opinion. In my opinion, it is, just because you're not listening to your body at all there. And that's just asking for an injury, to be honest, in my opinion. Rudisha was no different. If he felt tired, he would rest or he would change the program. From what I understand, and from my, of course I haven't trained alongside Farah, but I've done a lot of interviewing of people that have, and a lot of study on him, and he is pretty similar. So it's a real thing that they have a day off every now and then. Rudisha has a day off every week, but he's an 800 meter runner, so he doesn't have to, I guess, do so much volume. But yeah, they definitely do listen to their body a lot more than what I see in the West.
And we do need to pick up from Thursday's 30 to 40k tempo run onwards to finish his typical training week.
Yeah.
But just on the difference, like in technology, do you see much of it? Did they have any reliance on technologies, or was it based by feel?
Very
pacing?
little. A lot of them didn't have watches at all. A lot of, especially the guys that turned up outside the NN running camp, mainly because they can't afford it. And a lot of those guys were running with terrible shoes as well, like really old shoes that were just sort of donated. These guys aren't the guys at the front. These guys, they're probably guys that could run 2:10 or 2:12 for a marathon. But unfortunately in Kenya, that's nothing. Yeah. But getting back to his week, so Tuesday is the track and Thursday is the long run. So the long run alternates 30k, 40k, 30k, 40k, almost always at the same effort. It's always around 3:15 per kilometre, 3:10, 3:15. And that's probably the equivalent of almost marathon pace if you take down the altitude and put him on a flat road. And Saturday is fartlek. So I know fartlek's supposed to be random intervals. It's not really. It's actually they call it fartlek, but it's actually intervals. So they alternate a whole lot of different sessions. One of the main ones they do is 13 by 3 minutes with a minute rest. They're at about 2:45 to 2:50 per kilometre just on the trails. Another one they do often is 30 by 1 minute on, 1 minute off. Another one that we were there for that was a good one was 4 times 10 minutes with 2 minutes rest. That was slightly slower, about 2:55s. That was the one that they did on the highway. That was actually a really fascinating one because in the first rep, Kipchoge just like he was starting with a group of guys that were all pretty good marathoners. There was a couple of guys there that run 2:06, 2:07. In the first rep, he just completely gapped them by. He finished the first rep about 150 meters in front of everyone else in 10 minutes. And these guys are 2:06 guys. I think there may even be one 2:05 guy. So, yeah, we knew he was ready to roll when that happened. So, yeah, that was interesting. Some other sessions that they do, they were the main ones, the 30 by 1 minute, 13 by 3 minutes, 4 by 10. There's a few others that we mentioned in the book, so I'm not just pitching the book here, but of course I don't remember absolutely everything about the training, but it all is in the book at the end. So for those interested, it's on Amazon. If you just type in Eliud Kipchoge, you'll see it come up. So it's all there. I think some of the other ones are pretty similar sessions. They're sort of 1 to 2 minute recoveries, and they're between sort of 3 minutes and 10 minute intervals. Yeah.
And the total mileage or volume for him,
Yep.
Eliud, would be...
It's about 200 to 220 kilometres in a week, depending on how he's feeling.
You're listening to Matt Fox of Sweat Elite sharing around the insights of what Eliud Kipchoge, current world marathon record holder, and of course 2016 Olympic Games marathon champion, does behind the scenes when it comes to preparation for his major races. Support for today's show comes from Sanitarium PB. Looking to achieve your personal best? Sanitarium PB can help. This refreshing drink contains 32 grams of protein per serve to help with muscle recovery when included as part of a balanced diet. Sanitarium PB is made with a balanced blend of milk and plant proteins, all your essential amino acids, and contains no artificial sweeteners. Find Sanitarium PB in delicious chocolate or vanilla flavors at your local petrol station. Be your personal best recover and refuel with Sanitarium PB. Support for today's show also comes from Pogo Physio. We exist to help you get back to your physical best following injury. We want everyone who walks through the doors of Pogo Physio to cross their physio finish line. And that's where we high-five you, tell you that we love you, and celebrate the fact that you've completed rehabilitation and that you are back to your physical best. To find out more about Pogo Physio's unique and award-winning fixed-fee rehabilitation services or our 1-hour initial appointments, jump over to pogophysio.com.au. For now, let's jump back with Matt Fox of Sweat Elite sharing around the training, hints, tips, and background of Eliud Kipchoge, current world marathon record holder and Olympic marathon champion. And Matt, in terms of Rudisha, you spent time around the Rudisha camp as well.
Yeah.
Was his approach fairly similar? It was fairly structured, not changing a lot, but subject to how they felt, of course, but it's fairly similar.
It's almost exactly the same.
Really?
Attitude-wise, yeah. I mean, obviously the training was completely different. But in terms of the weekly structure, the only main difference was he had Sunday off every week, regardless. It doesn't matter what was happening. Hard sessions on, from memory, I've studied so many athletes that it's hard to sometimes remember exactly what each one does. But I think from memory it was Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Track on Tuesdays, Saturdays. Thursday was fartlek. The rest of the time was just easy running and some exercises. I guess one major difference between those two runners, I know one's 800 and one's marathon, so they're completely different events, but Rudisha did a lot of exercises, whereas Kipchoge did not. Kipchoge was really about volume, whereas Rudisha was more around that 90 to 100 kilometre mark. In fact, probably closer to 80 to 90 kilometres per week. But he did a lot of sessions where they'd just do a light jog for 3 or 4K and then do a lot of like plyometric work or stretching or Pilates. Like they did a lot of that stuff, whereas Kipchoge didn't do any of that.
And no gym work or...
when we were there, Kipchoge did not, but from what I understand, and we asked him briefly, they do a little bit before their marathon lead-in. So in their final 3 months, they don't do any, but before that, they do, I think, 1 or 2 sessions a week of just general strength. But for whatever reason, I actually don't understand, they don't do any in the 12 weeks leading up to the marathon.
Yeah. And, I mean, you've interviewed and sourced information from other super well-known runners, former world record marathon holder Wilson Kipsang as an example, and former guest of the show, Craig Mottram. What would you, if you had to look across, run your lens across the habits of all these outstanding performers, and this is speaking to, you know, us as anyone listening in who has an interest in being at their physical best, what would you say, Matt, would be the top 3 characteristics of reaching peak performance?
Yep. Ooh, it's a great question. I think number one is a very basic point, but it's something that I don't think people really think too much about, and it's enjoy it and be social about it. So all of them have really social training environments where they turn up and they actually have a good time and they have a laugh. Now, Mo Farah, again, I haven't trained with him, but I've seen tons of videos of him training. He's always kicking a football around, like having a laugh with his training partners. Kipchoge was exactly the same. Rudisha was exactly the same. Mottram was exactly the same. And a lot of people struggle with motivation a lot of the time, I think, and don't really realize why. And I think that's a really important point that people don't place enough importance on. I know it's easier said than done, especially if you're working or, you know, you're in an area where maybe there's not a training group around. I fully understand it's not so simple. But these guys all have a really motivating and inspiring group of people around them. And I think that's something that's a little bit overlooked when it comes to motivation. So I myself now, when I got back, I recently moved back from Europe to Australia. And one of the first things I did now, so I'm not trying to shoot for anything huge at the moment. I'd love to run a 2:30 marathon in the next couple of years. So just for perspective, which is obviously fast, but it's not sort of Olympic level. I got in contact with a running group here on the Gold Coast, and I knew Jackson Elliott, Gold Coast Run Company, where we are here recording this episode. I knew that Jackson had created this good environment that, so Jackson's the head coach of Gold Coast Run Co, where there's, you know, a lot of laughing going on and a lot of banter and a lot of, you know, having fun. And I'm currently like really motivated to run a marathon in 5 weeks now in Italy. And I think a lot of that comes from just being in a good group environment. So on the same point, I think that's the number one thing.
Just to enjoy it.
Just enjoy it, yeah, and really try and find a good group of people around there. Get on Strava or get on an app where you can follow your friends and be competitive as well. Like that's a big part of it. Okay, the Kenyans don't do that part, but but I do, and a lot of the Westerners do. Number 2 is probably be careful about how easily you are sucked into believing that all the other little gadgets and sports supplements you really focus on, because I don't believe, after studying a lot of these guys, I don't believe that they're really very important. Kipchoge, Rudisha, Farah, Mottram, Kipsang, they all have very little external gadgets, sports supplements. They all do the very basics with that stuff. They all take sports drink. They all have their own sponsors like that, but very few of them really go deep into the science and track everything and have all these little magic tricks and gels and stuff. They don't really, almost none of them do that.
So they weren't taking gels on these 30 to 40k runs?
No. In fact, the 40k one, all of them, but I remember asking before the first 40k, when I asked Eliud, I said, are you going to have any fluid in this run or a gel? And he goes, no, we do it dry. So he did 40k at 3:15 per k, 3:10 with no fluid. I'm not really sure why, but so yeah, he didn't take anything. I guess it's just to get his body used to being able to do that. Yeah. Mind you, it was pretty cool. It was pretty cold, so he probably wasn't sweating. He wasn't sweating too much. But yeah, so that's probably the second point. The third point I'm still struggling to come up with, because they're the 2 big ones. But they're definitely the 2 big points. Like, number 1, really enjoy it and be social about it, and and ideally try and surround yourself with good training partners. There's a good article we wrote that's written on our website that's written by Alberto Salazar, who's Mo Farah's ex-coach, about that point, the importance of good training partners. So that's the same point. And the second one is just be wary of how much time and money you're spending on gadgets and supplements, because I really don't think they help that much.
And would there be, if you could comment on the mindset, in the book, it's referenced that they lead a monastic lifestyle with unwavering drive to achieve their goals and pursue their best. Yeah, so that's almost like a juxtaposed against the social aspect. So they're getting serious work done, but they're also enjoying it as they go. But what would you comment around the mindset of these outstanding performers? What do you think sets them apart from the other 30 to 40 people that were running on the trail that morning?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a tough one.
From your observations, having
pure
trained
talent
in Kenya.
plays a massive part, unfortunately. Just natural talent. All of those guys mentioned were exceptional runners at a young age, without fail. So that's definitely something that obviously people can't really learn anything from, but it's just the reality. But just getting amongst that training and really not making any excuses. Like, all of them are just really tough mentally. Like, it's pouring with rain, it's cold outside, who cares? Just get it done. If you have to change to the highway, get it done. There's just no thought in any of their minds, especially Eliud, like that we're gonna postpone this or not do it at all. Like, it's just a really, I know it's a very sort of basic thing to say, but that's really what I've observed from all of them, is that they're just really tough mentally, and they've set their goals very clearly in their mind as to where they want to get to. I think that's another big point, which is also a basic one that's maybe a little bit underrated, is having a really clear goal. Like, all of them have always, throughout their entire careers, had like really crystal clear goals as to when they have to run fast, on what date. And I've really noticed that after interviewing a lot of them and spending some time with them. They know exactly when they have to be ready to roll, and I think that's always sitting in the back of their mind. So I hope that answers the question well enough anyway.
And it's interesting that they've got the clarity of goals, Matt. They've also got the drive, but they've got that receptivity to know when they need to pull it back.
Exactly. It's a really fine, it's like I don't know the right word for it, but it's the balance, I guess, of having to do all of them at once, because you've got to have the firm goal there, the drive to get everything done, but at the same time, you have to really carefully listen to your body. So it's a real balance there of getting those things right, because I think it's really easy to have a firm goal, a clear goal, be motivated, and then not listen to your body. And I think that's a lot of people fall into that category. Whereas I think all these guys do very well. Maybe I don't know if I'm right in saying this, because I haven't spent much time with Mottram, but potentially he didn't do that very well because he ended up having a lot of injuries at the end of his career. But I could be wrong with that. I would freely admit maybe I am. But especially the Africans, they are just really listening to their body, how they feel. So yeah, it's a really good question, a good point. Find that balance is probably a bit tricky.
And Matt, when they're resting, so they're on a rest day or they're tired,
Yeah.
what are they doing at that point?
Nothing. They're just sleeping and they're eating and drinking tea. Yeah, there's no cross training up there. There's no gyms in Kaptagat, which is where Kipchoge lives. There's no pools. Like the idea of cross training to them is just like, what? Like they don't know how to do that. So there's they don't. There's no. We couldn't access a pool up there. Kipchoge could have found a gym. He could have driven probably half an hour to get a gym. But as I said earlier, they do some gym in there before their lead up. But there's no swimming or there's no cycling or anything like that. So yeah, there's just resting. Yeah.
You're listening to Matt Fox, co-author of Eliud Kipchoge, History's Fastest Marathoner, an insight into the Kenyan life that shapes legends, sharing around Eliud Kipchoge's training squad and just how he goes about these mighty athletic feats. If you missed last week's episode featuring another Olympic champion, Sarah Carrigan, 2004 Women's Road Cycling Race champion, then be sure to jump back and listen to Sarah share the highs, the lows, and the learnings of her career. Here's a little snippet of what you missed.
Training session most loved. I think I loved it when we did motor pacing. That was always a real thrill, where we were behind the motorbike, simulating race day, feeling fast, feeling zippy, feeling light, really getting those race legs going. I was always a racer, and so I guess having that in training was something that, really brought a smile to my face, even though that hurt too, but it definitely had a lot of fun.
To tune into the full episode, jump back from within your favourite podcast player and enjoy Sarah Carrigan, OAM and Olympic road race cycling champion. For now, let's jump back with Matt Fox of Sweat Elite, co-author of Eliud Kipchoge, History's Fastest Marathoner. Matt, you've had those great experiences, and now Sweat Elite, I believe, is conducting tours for people to be able to go and enjoy the Kenyan running experience.
We've done one, and we're going to do another one again soon. It was a really good experience. We had 14 people, I think it was, come on the last tour. It really came about as of people asking us, sending us messages on Facebook going, oh, can you help us go to Kenya? Can you help us go to Kenya? We've seen that how do you do this? How do you do that? So we created a tour and did it. We're going to do some more. It was a little bit tricky because, I guess, a little bit of inside information. Part of the tour was to meet elite athletes. That was a big part of it. And I've spoken very positively about the Kenyan attitude and lifestyle, but I guess one of the downfalls is that a lot of the athletes that we scheduled to meet up with, and they didn't show up. A lot of them, about half of them did, but about half of them didn't, and that made me feel pretty bad for the tour. So this is probably going to turn some people off if we promote another one. But a lot of them just forgot to, I'd even remind them the day before, and they just forgot and were sleeping or something like that. So
they were resting, and rest means rest, right?
Yeah. So that was a little bit tricky. It was funny because we had Sondre Moen, he was the European marathon record holder until Farah just broke it the other week. We had Julian Wonders, who's a 21-year-old kid that almost broke an hour for a half. We had a few Westerners up there, and they all turned up like on time, ready to go. And a few of the other Kenyans did, but quite a lot of the Kenyans just didn't show up, and it was a little bit tricky. So that was a hard part. But in general, they all really enjoyed it. It was a good time. We're going to do another one for sure.
And I mean, aside from the meet and greets, which obviously have some attractiveness to them, just being exposed. If you're a runner that's pursuing your best, being exposed to the observations that you've shared today, must just change the way you look at your training ongoing, and probably deeper than that. Just how you look at your life.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what you just said is exactly right. I've had a couple of people. I've stayed in touch with a lot of the people on the tour. And a few of them, continuously sort of say like that was such an eye-opening experience. I've changed my training around and really, one guy especially, his name's Bruno. He like used to focus a lot on the things that don't matter. So a lot of the when I say gadgets don't matter, of course there are if you've got certain injuries that they can be really beneficial. But what I'm saying is like, you can get a little bit carried away with how much technology you really use when you're running and all this sort of stuff. He used to like really look into all these L-carnitine and all these supplements. He used to have, he brought them along with him to Kenya, and he sort of, when he went to Kenya and he experienced that, he just sort of went, oh, this is just relevant. Like these guys don't use any of this stuff. They just run hard all the time. Like that's the basic of it. And he sends me messages now and then thanking me all the time. So yeah, what you said's absolutely right. Yeah, it is a life-changing experience, and I recommend anyone listening to this that has the idea of going to Kenya, like, just if you can do it, book the ticket. It's an amazing experience. I'm not selling my own tour here. Like, go on your own. It's fascinating.
And you've got the Sweat Elite podcast, which is launched, including the episode that I just listened to in preparation for this today, Matt, where you share some of the frequently asked questions about training in Kenya. So if people didn't want to join a formal tour, they could, pull a lot of resource from that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, recommend going and listen to that. It's a free listen. Had a ton of people ask questions about it on the Facebook page and Instagram. So I just listed, I think it's 10 or 12 questions and just answered them all on a podcast. So, if you're interested in going to Kenya, maybe check that out and it'll give you some information about it, yeah.
You mentioned just there the phrase, Matt, run hard all the time, but there certainly was interspersed some really slow running, right? So.
Of course, sorry, I probably didn't phrase that very well. They definitely run hard every second day, and even on their easy runs, it's really how they feel, back on the same point. If they feel tired, they will jog slow. So I'm talking 5-minute Ks. If they feel good, they always start slow. And they might pick it up to running 3:45 at the end of their easy run. So it's really based on how they feel. And their recovery days, so the days that they're not doing an interval session or a tempo run, the paces of their runs are actually really all over the place for that reason. That sometimes they'll average 4:30. So when I say they, I'm talking about maybe a random marathoner, a 210 or 212 guy, random guy, which is a lot of over there. And sometimes they'll average 3:40. So it's really all over the place, and it's just based on how they feel.
Yeah, it comes back to that perception of effort, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
Matt, every featured guest issues listeners with a physical challenge for the week. Mm-hmm. What is Matt Fox's of Sweat Elite's physical challenge of the week going to be to listeners?
Yeah, so I guess one thing we haven't talked too much about yet is the diet over there. Kenya's obviously a very it's a place where we're very privileged over here in Europe and Australia compared to Kenya. So let's put it that way. I think most people know that, and their diet is very simple in a sense of they can't really afford processed foods, and it's just not really produced much over there. So they eat a lot of vegetables, a lot of fruit, and a lot of very basic stuff. So I have, since some of those trips, tried eating predominantly plant-based diet, and I've found it very beneficial. So my challenge to people is to try it for 1 week. Try to eat no processed foods for a week. Stick with chicken and beef and stuff, but try and eat nothing processed for 1 week. See how you feel, see how you train. If you feel good, extend it 1 more week and take it from there, because that's actually how I started with this challenge. And I'm now 3 to 4 months into it, and I'm still predominantly plant-based because I've felt like my energy levels are better. I've felt like even like things like concentration and stuff, so it's quite random how it's affected me. But that would be my challenge. Try 1 week only, because it's difficult to change your diet where you eat nothing processed at all. Fruit, vegetables, load on that stuff. Even meat, no problem. But eat nothing processed for 1 week and see how you feel. And I almost guarantee that you'll feel pretty good.
That's a great matter. Great physical challenge for the week. I've got to ask though, out of interest, how do you survive the shopping centres, walking through the shopping aisles, and this discipline? It really is. It really is discipline. I mean, I started off, as I said, with 2 weeks experiment, and it made me feel so much better that now I actually really don't want to eat processed foods so much. I don't call myself a vegetarian or a vegan. I call myself, I just made it up. I call it 90% plant-based. So I have 90% plant-based, roughly. And the other 10% I just sort of have whatever. So I have a beer every now and then. I have a bit of cheese every now and then, because that's obviously not vegan. After a 32K run the other day, I had an Oreo McFlurry. So like that's a 10% buffer there. So I'm not completely strict on it, because I got some advice actually from another podcast. I think it was a Rich Roll podcast of someone saying that there's not really a big difference between being 100% and 90% as long as you're predominantly like that way. So, I'm doing that now. So it does come down to discipline, and I just feel really good on the plant-based stuff. So it's not really hard anymore to avoid it, to be honest. But I definitely still have the occasional chocolate and beer. So you're a good man.
Yeah.
Matt, if listeners want to follow the Sweat Elite journey more, where can they go? Yeah,
sure. So we have a lot of good free content that I'm really stoked that people find a lot of value out of that don't have to pay anything. That's on Instagram and Facebook mostly. So that's just Sweat Elite on Instagram, Sweat Elite on Facebook. I think we've got probably about 120,000 people sort of across the board following us now, which is awesome. I mean, in such a short time, I feel very, proud to have built something like that. Website, sweatelite.co. There's over 300 articles, 7 ebooks, some coaching services on offer, and anyone can read. The articles are probably the most popular thing right now because we've sort of created an easy way for people to read them rather than having to buy a book and stuff like that. It's free for anyone to read 3 articles in a month, and then after that it's just $1 a week. And we only charge that because, I pay writers to go out and research and write. So if we didn't do that, it wouldn't work. And we've got over 7,000 subscribers now, which is really good. And it's give up a coffee every 3 weeks and you can read unlimited amount of training information from elite athletes. There's a lot of study there that's been done that's hard to find anywhere else. So I would recommend the website, but if you sort of want to just get some free content, the Instagram page and the Facebook page.
Yeah, and they're both brilliant follows. So, Matt, thank you for stopping by today and sharing some of these insights of observing, the mechanics behind these peak performers that we all aspire to and admire and all want to know more about.
Yeah.
Whether we're aspiring for the 5-hour marathon, the 3-hour marathon, or, the 2:30 marathon, we can all learn a lot from it.
Absolutely. Thanks very much for having me. And I think that on the website and the Facebook page and Instagram page is something to learn from, for anyone of any ability, in the running world. So, again, thanks for having me. It was fun.
Thank you, Matt. So there you have it, another episode of the Physical Performance Show, and I trust you enjoyed today's episode featuring Matt Fox of Sweat Elite. What a fascinating insight and some great stories from what it's like to be around the environment that is Eliud Kipchoge's training squad. If you did enjoy the episode, then please be sure to let myself and Matt know. You can find myself over on social media at Brad_beer on Twitter or Instagram, and Matt over at Sweat Elite at Sweat Elite on Instagram. If you know someone that would enjoy today's episode, then please be sure to share it with them. Sharing means the world to myself and also today's guest, Matt, and it helps the Physical Performance Show reach the earbuds of more people who, just like you, are looking to pursue and perform at their physical best. A big thanks to everyone who's been rating and reviewing the Physical Performance Show. This week, a big shout out to Searching for Hurt. And Searching for Hurt rated the show 5 stars and commented, "No idea how I stumbled onto this show, but thank my lucky stars that I did. Find the insights that Brad draws out from the athletes fascinating and have been smashing out interviews daily to catch up. Keep up the great work, and if you haven't listened to a podcast yet, what are you waiting for?" Searching for Hurt, thanks for taking the time to leave the review, and I'd like to send you something to say thanks, and that's a signed copy of my Amazon running and jogging bestseller, You Can Run Pain-Free, the second and revised edition. So be sure to drop me a message over on social media at Brad_beer, and I will get the book in the post to you. And if you're yet to subscribe to the Physical Performance Show, but you're enjoying the episodes, then please press subscribe from within your favorite podcast player. Subscribing to this show is one of the best ways to help it grow and be discovered. So thank you. If you're yet to hit subscribe, then please do so now. Massive thanks to the 3 good folk that make this show possible week in, week out. That is Daryl Misson, our audio engineer, Susan Wilkin, all things show administration, and Matthew Walding on all things graphic design. A big congratulations also to the winner of the Physio Creme prize pack. That concluded on episode 133, and that winner is Nathan Kelly. So Nathan, congratulations on winning that fantastic Physio Creme prize pack. Now, massive thanks also to today's show supporter, Sanitarium PB. Without their support, this show is not possible. Podcasts, while free to download, are certainly not free to produce, so Sanitarium PB, a massive thank you for supporting the Physical Performance Show. Now, coming up on next week's episode of the Physical Performance Show, I catch up with Dan Smith, Australian swimming Olympian and Australian swim team member. And as you know, one of the themes of this show is to inspire you to pursue your own physical best. And next week's guest, Dan Smith, does just that. Dan will share around the highs and the very low lows of his swimming journey, which took him from promising Australian junior to a crushing drug addiction that nearly took him out of the sport, and then a mighty return to the pool to make his Olympic Games debut. So you're not going to want to miss next week's episode of the Physical Performance Show featuring Dan Smith. Until then, Keep pursuing your physical best performance. I'm Brad Beer, and this has been the Physical Performance Show.